Hi, everybody. Happy Friday. Happy Freelancer Live Day. I am so excited. I am going to pop my guest into the comments right now and pin that comment so all of you can see. All right. Oh, let me see. There we go. Pin comment. Awesome. Lindsey, I will have you come in a moment. We're just going to give it a couple minutes for people to arrive. And while we're waiting for a couple more people to join here, I just wanted to give a couple of quick announcements before we get started. So during the interview, we can focus solely on Lindsey. So just a quick couple things. I just uploaded all past Freelancer Live videos to my YouTube page. I will make sure in the notes and the comments below after this particular post that I put the link in there so you can actually find my YouTube page since it's brand spanking new. But I also wanted to ask if you can head over to erincoles.com. That's ERINCOLES.com. You can go ahead and subscribe to my newsletter there, and I will be sending out a newsletter later today with my new YouTube page, some recent posts that I've done on my blog. So if you are interested in getting updates about my blog, about Freelancer Live, who my guests are, and all of that fun stuff, you can go ahead and go to, once again, erincoles.com and sign up for my newsletter, and I'll make sure I send the YouTube link there later today if you're interested. I did get some feedback that, being able to watch it on your computer and leave it on in the background is really helpful, so having it on YouTube would be nice. So it is up there now. All right, Lindsey, so you should see a little thing on your side asking to join the video, so you can go ahead and do that now, and I'll get you in and get you started. I am so looking forward to it. Let me know if you have trouble getting in. And for anyone watching, let us know if you can see us and hear us okay throughout. And of course, if you have any questions as we're going along, please let us know. We are happy to help, happy to answer. All right, let's see here. There we go. Hi.
Hi,
There you are. How's it going?
it's going really well, thank you. How are you?
Good. You look gorgeous.
Thank you, as do you.
Thank you. I'm so excited to chat with you today. How's your Friday going so far?
So far, so good. It's going well. In Harlem, a
Nice.
little further south than you are now.
Yep. Not too far, just a stone's throw. Quick subway ride. So I am excited to have you today. You are my first educator and researcher that I'm chatting with, so I'm extra excited to sort of dive into that. That's something very new that I've literally only seen from Drew's perspective really so far. So I'm looking forward to chatting with you more about that. So I'm just going to do a quick intro about what this is for anyone who might be joining for the first time. I'll go ahead and read your extremely impressive bio, and then we'll get into a chat about sort of what you're up to and what you're researching and all of that fun stuff. I have literally these like a page of things written out for you, so I'm like so excited. So welcome everybody. This is Freelancer Live. My name is Erin Coles and I'm an entrepreneur based in New York City. My husband and I run a wedding band collective called the Metropolitan Players. I'm also super passionate about helping female founders, so I spend a lot of my time and energy volunteering and working with organizations that do that. And I started Freelancer Live back in May because I was seeing so many people talk about their own experiences with COVID and what's going on in their lives, mostly people, of course, in my own circles, which include freelancers, gig workers, small business owners, musicians, and all of the people who really were extremely negatively affected by what happened. So I really wanted to open up a platform to chat with people about their experiences and stories. So today's guest is Lindsey Castellano, and she is a musician, educator, and researcher. And welcome today, Lindsey.
Thank you. I'm so grateful and honored to be here and talking to you. It's such a joy.
Of course. I'm so happy to have you. And thank you, Yumi, for your note about my mustard blazer. It is definitely a nice fall color, so I love these little colored blazers. All right, so I'm gonna dive in with your bio, and then we'll get into our conversation. So Lindsey Castellano is a New York City-based musician and educator. Lindsey is an applied violin and viola instructor at Teachers College, Columbia University. She is pursuing her doctorate at Teachers College in music and music education, where she is also the Florence Geffen Fellow for Music Assessment and a research associate for the Center of Arts Education and Research at Teachers College. She has been researching online education for several years, focusing her dissertation on the creation of engaging and effective online courses, which is probably extra important right now. Lindsey has been an active community music facilitator for the past decade. She presented the ethical considerations of facilitating online community music programs at the 2018 International Community Music Student Research Symposium and published an article about her experience creating an online program focused on composing social justice songs with students from the Bronx, titled Facilitating a Digital Community Music Program. Lindsey has worked on program evaluations and curriculum designs for K-12 arts organizations in New York City. And I'm going to let her talk a little more about exactly what that is later, so stay tuned. Make sure you don't leave. Her first two degrees are in music performance. Her master's specialized in violin and string pedagogy with a minor in jazz and philosophy. Lindsey's most recent music endeavors include singing, songwriting, and recording several different albums, which she is looking forward to releasing in the coming year. This is amazing. You're amazing. Yeah, and Yumi says same. That's amazing. It truly is. I mean, like, everything you've been doing and focusing on is so incredible. So tell us a little bit about how you got from little Lindsey when you were starting out to where you are today, just like the story of who you are and how you got here.
Well, thank you for that beautiful introduction, and yeah, I'm so pleased to be here talking to you. I was born in Northeast Pennsylvania, about 2.5 hours from here, and I know that very well because right now I'm living about 2 blocks from Manhattan School of Music, which is where I went to their pre-college, and my mom would drive me every week into the city to have violin lessons and attend MSM pre-college. And I saw the violin first when I was 5. And I don't remember this, but I remember seeing the violin very vividly for the first time. I remember seeing it in kindergarten and wanting to play it, but my parents said that I asked for a full year after that, and I kept asking, and they thought, like, 'cause I was a little kid and I wanted to keep playing, like, I wanted lots of things. So once they realized, like, this was something I actually was serious about, for my 6th birthday, they got me a violin and violin lessons with a local teacher who I studied with for a number of years there in Homestead, Pennsylvania, where I grew up. And then she said, it's time for you to move on. And that's when my mom started driving me to New York City every week. And I had very, very dedicated and devoted parents. My dad was a singer-songwriter, played guitar, and I have actually his Martin D37, which I also play, and I've started singing and songwriting as well, that you mentioned in my bio, and I'm happy to talk about too. But to get to where I am now, so I always had a strong tie with New York City, and I always knew there was nothing in my mind that doubted that I was going to be a violinist. I just knew it from when I was a little kid. And so it was interesting to me as a high schooler when people were trying to decide what major to do in college. I knew it was going to be violin from as long as I can remember. So I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I studied violin performance there, and I loved that. And then I actually was going to do my master's in violin performance at Manhattan School of Music. I wanted to do auditions, and a couple months before auditions for my master's, I was in a car accident. I hydroplaned on a rainy road in New Jersey, and it's just in the middle of the day, and I chipped a bone in my hand, and I sprained my wrist, and I wasn't able to do.
Oh.
So I was devastated at the time, and I called my professor from the University of Wisconsin, and he said, there's a position for a string pedagogy teaching assistant. Why don't you apply for that and think about coming back here? And so I did, and I was accepted, and I instructed the undergraduate high strings fundamental class at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and I fell in love with higher education. So my degree, my master's was in performance and pedagogy. I've been teaching privately since I was 13. My original violin teacher let me shadow her, and then I started with beginner students. And so I've always had somewhat of a private studio, but teaching at the college level became a passion of mine once I started that in my master's. So when I finished my master's, I knew I wanted to go on to a doctorate. And from Madison, I moved to Chicago, and I had a private studio there for a couple of years. And then my mom passed away, and I moved. I wanted to be closer to my younger sister, who is a phenomenal and talented female artist in her own. She's a fashion designer. She's wonderful. She's worked with Alexander McQueen.
Wow.
London before when he actually passed away, she was still working at his company there. So that's a fun story. There's
Act.
I'll stay on track though. So I moved back to the East Coast. I moved to New York City in January of 2015, and I had applied. My mom knew a week before she passed away that I had applied for my doctorate, and I started at Teachers College. Actually, I had applied to NYU, and I received a call from one of the faculty members there who said, like, I'm really sorry, we only accept one person, like, over a number of years, and like how competitive their program was.
Insane.
And I was disappointed, but then I actually didn't know about Teachers College at the time. And he mentioned, why don't you look into Teachers College? I think they might have a similar program that you would be interested in. And so I spoke with Hal Abelus at Teachers College, and he met with me and said, I think this is a great program for you. And so I officially applied, and I started my career at Teachers College in higher education. And that really sparked my interest in research, which I hadn't realized how intriguing and fun it was. And I started doing mixed methods, qualitative and quantitative data collection, and doing more. I had been working with community music programs since my time at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, so for a number of years. And then I realized when I started my doctorate at Teachers College, I also started through a class with Dr. Lori Custodero. It was part of a class and I expanded and ended up doing for a year, which was teaching in East New York at a resource center for families experiencing homelessness. And I worked with them for a year, and I absolutely adored it. It was such a profound experience, and it was really significant to me. And I actually have a chapter coming out in a textbook for community music, and I think it's going to be published in the next year.
Wow. Congratulations. That's exciting.
Lee Willingham is from the University of Laurier, is I think the lead editor on that. And so that's exciting. But the one thing, so I was working in East New York, which is about an hour and a half ride from Teachers College, and it was difficult getting there. And the one thing I noticed from all the families, and the program I did was intergenerational. So we worked, actually there were triplets who were like, I think they were 3 or 4 weeks old when they came, and then grandparents. So our age range was quite vast, and it was really incredible to include the whole family. And there were some really just significant bonds and connections made, even for the families themselves, when one of the fathers had said, this is such a special time for us. It gives me something to talk to my family about besides, did you hear those gunshots last night? And that it
Wow.
was such a profound experience to have that. And so that experience with these just incredible people. And I noticed one thing, that even though they were experiencing homelessness, they all had a cell phone for their families. And they would stay after with my co-facilitator, who is Clayton Dom, who's actually starting his doctorate in Seattle this coming year, which I'm excited about. Actually, this fall, I think. I can't believe how the time goes.
So
anyway,
fast.
so we started I was thinking, like, how can we connect with these families? So we started an online endeavor, which was an online community music program. And we started working with students from the Bronx and seeing if we could create a meaningful connection using music technology. And we never met the students in person. We just did it over online.
Wow.
And that was what you mentioned in my bio. That experience. And I was actually, that was in, I think it was 2018. I was discouraged by a scholar in the field who said, I don't think you should do it because it's not possible to have a meaningful connection online. And I persisted. I was like, I'd like to try it regardless.
Yeah.
And so it was it was also a very significant experience in which the kids were writing, like you said, social justice songs, and from the introduction, the bio, and it was incredible. Like there were the songs that the youngest student was 12, and it was really a beautiful experience. So I started my dissertation in online education, which was also sparked by with working with Jim Frankel at Teachers College, is music technology class, in which the first day he said, my goal for my students has always been to have them love music as much as I do. And that has stuck with me. And so I've just found ways to bring that music and to them, regardless of the setting. And online communities have been a great connector.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I feel like I could unpack like 1,000 things that you just said. I don't even know where to start. Okay, so let's like go, let's go back a few steps. Just like I'm thinking about the fact that there are so many moments that you just mentioned about your story up to where you are today that were things that like you literally could not control that happened to you that have like vastly affected your trajectory, which is so interesting. And really, really cool that you've been able to sort of latch on to each of those experiences and things that happened to you. And rather than be like, oh, my life is over, I can't do this, like you've been able to sort of embrace those things and let life sort of lead you on that path to where you are today. Like you've done so many amazing things with all of the hardships in your life, which I think is incredible. Um, and if you don't mind me sort of asking this part of the question, I mean, I'm so sorry for the loss of both of your parents. I can't even imagine how difficult that must have been. Also, so close to each other. Like, I mean, that's to me, I can't even imagine. I mean, I think about my parents and I'm like, I'm hoping they stay for as many possible years as possible. But like, has that experience, like not has that, but how did that experience of losing both of your parents sort of influence your trajectory and your ability to potentially work with these students that are also experiencing their own hardships? I'm just imagining there must be some sort of tie between those things and how you can really sort of connect with other people.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so my dad was diagnosed with cancer when I was 13, and he lived for the next 13 years
Wow.
before he passed away. And then my mom passed away 15 months later. And then I had a series actually of events. My family home um, was foreclosed on because of the medical bills for my parents. And then my aunt, who I lived with in my undergrad in Madison, died of ALS. And it was a series of traumas. And my parents were extraordinarily open and understanding people, but um, and that's being said, there was mental health was not something that we really like thought about or talked about, or like
Yeah.
like depression or anxiety. And so I started looking more specifically, researching when I was working with the Family Resource Center for people experiencing homelessness in East New York. I started researching trauma,
Mhm.
and just even like from like a stress, like just Googling the definition of stress, of what that actually entails, what that considers, and then to a trauma, and then realizing, and then going further into PTSD, and realizing I had those symptoms, and that just for a number of years it had been undiagnosed. And so that was really significant for me, just through this research and I was in writing an article actually about the experience I had with these families who were going through trauma of not even having basic needs like met of safety and knowing if they were safety. And actually all the families that I worked with had been victims of domestic abuse. So there were just so many things that they were experiencing that were severely traumatic. And I hadn't even thought about that what I had gone through would be traumatic in any way until I very sincerely looked at the definition and then
Right.
further went into the research. And so I think that did allow me to connect with them on another level of just understanding or looking back at it. Yeah. And like this, okay, this is really traumatic in the face of all of this trauma and the resiliency of human beings, which is something that I've learned and really embraced over the years, of how resilient we are as humans. Because my parents were just my absolute biggest fans. They were my best friends, my mentors, my heroes. They were everything to me, and my family was extraordinarily close. And then when I didn't have that, and I didn't have someone calling me and say like, "Oh, did you practice today? Like, how's it going? Like, oh, you got a 98 on your paper. That's incredible. Like,
Yeah.
you're wonderful." And I lost all of that, like cheerleading and just some support and encouragement. And so like learning to do that for myself has been a journey over the years. And I realized that I don't think I was really conscious that I was doing that for other people, being a cheerleader for them, because that's what I just grew up knowing.
Right.
And that I think that aspect, I think that could have been one of the connecting factors, and that like I just so believe in the people that I'm working with, and just people in general. But I really cheerleaded for them, and to see them flourish in. Sorry, that's my door. And now
Okay.
oh, Rupert is the protector of my apartment.
He's such a good protector. Keeps you so safe.
He does. What a wonderful companion. So I'll stop there, and feel free to ask me to clarify anything.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you said it so incredibly well, and it's really interesting how you sort of just used what you knew and what you had learned growing up to help these other folks, and then found out through that process that you are going through a similar trauma, and like we're able to finally sort of like define it, which is, I think, sometimes one of the biggest ways that we can get through some of those hardships is like actually defining what it is that's happening, and then being able to process it from that point on and sort of like move on, not necessarily like forget, but be able to really like get past it affecting our daily lives. So I think you said it so well, and the resiliency, like all the things that you said. I mean, you are so incredibly smart. It's so impressive. Like, and you're so thoughtful. Like, there's so much about what you're saying. I'm like, it just makes me excited for what you are already doing and what you can do in the future, and how you're going to help so many lives. Because you're just so thoughtful, which is really, really fantastic. I love, okay, let me just like look at my notes here, because once again, there's so much that I want to ask you about. I'm like, what do I do first? Okay, so let's actually get back to that part about your work with Dr. Ablis and how the curriculum framework that you created. Can you expand on that and talk a little more about sort of how you did that, why you did that, and what that really looks like?
Sure. So, as the research associate for the Center for Arts Education and Research at Teachers College, I did a number of program evaluations with Dr. Ablis, and we did program evaluations for K through 12 arts organizations in New York City, and we ended up creating a curriculum for one of the arts organizations that was based in the Bronx, that was centered around social justice issues and educating the child as a whole. So having the framework be culturally aware and supportive of of social justice issues that was designed to develop content knowledge for basic music and dance with literacy. And then we encouraged them to explore creative depths and to support students as lifelong learners. So we did a number of professional development workshops for the teaching artists, and helped them as also on more freelance musicians. So that was also really fun for them to have that curriculum, to work with that curriculum framework. So it was just like adapted for what they were already doing, and then go out and visit the schools and the after school programs and help implement that curriculum framework.
Wow. That's it. That's so, it feels like a large project that you guys did. Like, that's so impressive. And what was it that sort of, I know that throughout all of these things that you're talking about, I might assume, given the trajectory that you've already mentioned, that you sort of have fallen into these things, but was there ever a catalyst and a moment that sort of really defined what you were going to focus your research on and your work on and your dissertation on, in terms of like sort of that mix between effective online learning plus like the ethics side of things plus like the social justice side of things? Like, how did you decide that that's what you were going to do?
I I don't know that I made a conscious decision. It was just, it seemed like that was always the path. It just seemed like it was always there. Kind of like when I started playing the violin, it was just, there was no question. It was just what I was going to do.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't recall a decisive moment where I was like, this is it. I think just along the way and seeing um, the humanness of people and of myself and my own family. Like up until the day my dad died, I was in total denial that he was going to die. I'd seen him sick for many years, and I was just like, there's no way. And then realizing that we are very mortal, and that we are as beings, we're just sensitive, and there's something very beautiful in that there is an impermanence to our existence. But really coming to terms with that for me was it just was like, why would we not make every opportunity as connective and as like beautiful as possible? Like that's the thing I really love about technology and online, is that you connect people. Like I have friends in England who I just absolutely adore, and to be able, it was actually from the International Center for Community Music, I met just some really beautiful people on their team who I absolutely admire and adore. And we started a community of community music researchers with some of the PhD students, and we would meet regularly because the dissertation processes can be quite isolating. And we would meet on Zoom before people utilized or even knew about Zoom, and we would talk. And so I really love that aspect of connecting. And so in any way, so connecting with communities, like bringing people together, is just really significant to me.
Yeah, I love that. I was just thinking as you were speaking the way that you were about just everything that you just said. I'm gonna re-listen to this PSA and like pull a quote from what you said, because now I can't even remember it. But like I would read and purchase several copies of a book if you wrote one, because like I think all of these things that are coming together and that have come together in your life have, it's really really inspirational how you talk about everything, and how you're able to take what you've been through and make so much good out of it. It's really really impressive. I'm just like, I'm like at a loss for words. I'm like, this is so cool. So I would love to hear a little bit more about your experience during this time with COVID, and how, I mean, just general experience, whatever you want to share, but more specifically, since you've been focusing on online education for so long, before it needed to be a thing that everybody did, um, what was this time like, slash, like, did you do anything to really like give people resources about how to effectively teach online when everybody sort of had to? Like, what has that been like?
I tried to. I actually had developed a course with Jim Frankel at Teachers College that was already like ready to go. So and it was in the spring, in March, that my sponsoring professor, Hal Abelus, said, like, you know, maybe you should reframe your dissertation instead of on a project dissertation in developing this course and going through it. Why don't you concentrate on the effects of the pandemic? And then he emailed me one day and he was like, oh, we just had a faculty meeting and they want a course. So this is perfect. Like, can you, so we submitted the course, and it wasn't picked up right away, but I was able to, as the program coordinator for the summer master's program in music and music education at Teachers College, I work closely with the students who I also adore. They're wonderful. And so I held a number of sessions for them just to just talk and connect. And that's something that I have found over the years of just listening or just providing a space for people to connect can be really can be very like healing and powerful. And I think that some of the educators might have found some solace in that, but I've also found that it's about a mindset from the educators who ended up persevering through this and doing well. And some educators kind of threw their hands up and were like, okay, this is like, I can't teach if I can't have them in person. But the ones who are finding this creative solution, and that's something I absolutely love about, I love working with people. Like, I love collaborating, because you take something that's could be just a great idea, and then someone else can add something to it that just makes it magical. Yeah. And makes it really, really work. Yeah, that's
That's such a great answer. I love that. I love that. I love how you even said, like, there are so many people out there who have thrown their hands up, and I think for sort of people like us who are more problem solvers, and we're always like, there's always an answer, we can get through this, we can find a way, like, it's going to be all right. It's great that you have already spent time on effective online education to the point where now you can really teach people how to do it. And I think that's incredible, because it was so frustrating to me, especially at the beginning of the pandemic. Like, I have Drew here teaching lessons every moment of every day on instruments that we had so many other people say, like, oh, I can't possibly teach music online. And it's like, no, that's not true. I'm literally watching it happen. Like, he's doing it right now. There's an answer, there's a creative way to do it. And I think that's so absolutely right and incredible. What would you say, like, you might have already given your top tip here about, like, creating that space, but what would you give as advice to somebody who is having to still, like, really switch to online learning now? I mean, not the learning side, but the teaching side. What would you say to someone who's really struggling with navigating that world right now?
so the research that I've been doing, and just the experience that I've had, is a blended approach is best. Some asynchronous, some synchronous. And I think the synchronous element is really important, just like doing this with you now, just like, because yes, we're physically distant, but seeing you and be able to respond to your facial expressions and your gestures, it makes a difference. And that was one of the findings from the community music program study that I did in 2018. One of the youngest, remember, the 12-year-old, I remember her saying, we did interviews post program, and she said, even though I know we were distant, it felt like we were in the same room, because we would do an asynchronous, like, here's the task for the week. It was some kind of composition assignment, and then we would meet and have a discussion live, and which was great, because my co-facilitator at the time was in Missouri, and I was in New York. And even though the students were in the Bronx, we never met them in person. So just having that online experience of connecting, so just providing the space. And then I've also found in leading discussions that prompts are really great, and that people like to respond to something, because just providing the space sometimes is not enough, because
Right.
there needs sometimes to have some gentle guidance, and then, or like, break out into smaller rooms. Or in my private studio, it has been it's been really fun to do composition. And that's something that was a huge proponent of the course that I developed with Jim Friel, that he has always been a huge proponent of. And when I took his new technologies course a number of years ago, he was saying that we're so performance based as music educators, and we have to be, because there's a lot of policies and procedures that are placed on us. But if you can show students that you might not be first chair or even last chair as a violinist, but you maybe like producing music is for you, maybe composing, maybe arranging, maybe you want to write about it, maybe you like theory, like, so there's so many other aspects to enter music, and using music as a medium for collaboration and expression and reflection. It's that's yeah. So I guess if I had to sum that all up, I like gentle guidance, like providing the space, and then providing like some kind, facilitating that discussion in somehow, if it's a group. And then I think just the student-centered approach in a private studio setting. And I know Drew probably has really wonderful things to say about that, but it's also been really, just having them play, like, yes, there's a slight delay, but you could still hear. And I worked on with a viola student this week, phrasing, and I was talking about how it was conversational, and like the difference between like monotone and bringing something that's 2D to life, and coloring the phrasing, so it has another dimension.
Yeah, it's so true that it's possible and that there are ways to do all of this. And it was really interesting as you were speaking, a couple of thoughts came to mind. First, I think that some of the things that you've researched and you've gone through on online learning, as like a business person running a business, I was like, yes, like these things resonate, and I didn't necessarily know what to call it before, but the synchronous and asynchronous side of things, like what we do is we tend to have, at least right now, like a bi-weekly video check-in with all of our employees, and then in between they have certain projects that they're working on, or we'll use Slack or some other form of communication to like get in touch on projects. And we started working remotely about 2 years before the pandemic, and it took us a while to figure out those little pieces of like what does work and what doesn't. And I think that like the research that you've done, it just spans across industries and spans into business as well, because all of those things that you've learned and researched can really help other people who are having to move to an online world right now. So that's wonderful advice. I just love the fact that it's possible, and it's okay, and it can happen. And I also love the fact that you talked about, specifically on the musician side, of sort of being the person to say like there's more that you can do with your music aside from just performing. I think that that's really hard for musicians to understand and to do, because playing and performing can be such a large part of a musician's happiness. But it's so interesting because it doesn't mean that you have to stop performing if you find that you also enjoy something else, like producing, like you said, which is really exciting and interesting. That's sort of the process that I went through. I'd been a performer my entire life. I did musicals. I have this picture behind me that's me as Belle with my brother. Like I like used to do it all the time, and it was like partially heartbreaking to know that I wouldn't be performing anymore, but I also knew that's not the life that I really wanted. And I loved the business side of things. So being involved in music and business at the same time was so fulfilling to me. And I think like having examples of other things you can do with music is really important for musicians to see, that like if you can't perform or you end up deciding it's not the right thing for you, there's another path, and that's okay. And that you can go through that through online learning, and even use technology to sort of explore what people are good at and what they like is really, really exciting. So I love everything you said. I feel like we could talk for hours. Like this is so exciting. I can't believe we've already been on for almost 40 minutes. Like I totally lost track of time. I'm just like soaking up everything you're saying. So we'll close out in a few minutes. But there are just a couple of quick things I wanted to go through just for people to understand a couple things. First, I'm going to ask you to sort of explain what the process of writing a dissertation is like, which is a huge one, I know. But before I was, going through that process with Drew and he was sharing what was going on, I literally had no idea. Not no idea, but it was like a cursory view, like sort of like, okay, cool, but like didn't understand how much it was. So I'd love for you to touch on that. And then before we leave, I definitely also want you to tell us a little bit about the recording projects and things that you're working on now. So let's start with the dissertation, and then we'll go to the recording projects.
Sure. And as you were talking, that I didn't mention like being a music critic or music administration. Like there's just so many different avenues that I absolutely, it's really inspiring to me. And I think actually, and also hearing you say, I would modify my answer before for educators that are switching online is like, my advice would be like, try again. Just
Yeah.
have a growth mindset and just keep trying absolutely anything that you can think of. Just try different avenues until you find a way that's engaging and effective for your students. And that's what I'm writing about in my dissertation. I'm reviewing some programs that are working. And so the dissertation process for me, it started out, I knew I wanted to get a doctorate. I knew I was going to write a dissertation, and the topic kind of transformed a few different times and evolved in a way that I wasn't completely expecting. I was originally thinking I would focus on community music, and then I was like, community music and online education, and then more just connecting, because I think with online education it just encompasses so much. So picking the topic was like the first big thing that morphed a few times before I got it into like a working problem statement, and then presenting that to my cohort, which we have every Tuesday evening. We meet and talk about ideas and do presentations. So picking the topic and then writing a little bit about it, and then modifying that, given suggestions and edits, and then writing more about it, and just kind of, it's just this constant, like, it's a very human process, because it's like cyclical, kind of like everything is in life. Like it's just, you keep going and writing and rewriting and adding and changing. So it's quite like life in a lot of ways, actually. So it seems both natural and unnatural, which I also found out from the number of years about this dialectic, that you can hold two truths that are opposing. So that's my best explanation of our overview of the dissertation, and I'm happy to go into any detail that you would like.
So I would just love to hear, like, from the point that you get your topic and you're working with your cohort, which is essentially like a group of students that are also writing their dissertations, right? So at the same time, so you're all going through sort of the same thing. Like, what's the process like from that point? Like, because I just want to, like, just an overview of like when things are sort of like due and what the whole process is to get your dissertation like actually reviewed and published, like sort of that, just a quick what that looks like, if you can.
Sure. So for me, writing the preliminary proposal, which I presented, and then the next step would be the advanced proposal, which is like 50-ish pages, and that I presented to my cohort of students who are in different levels and of their process in writing their dissertation. And for me, I really got stuck on the advanced proposal, and actually Drew was like invaluable in helping me get through it, because I remember him talking to me last spring and just saying, like, and just giving me advice, like, just do it, just write it down. Like, have the thing that has been really helpful is having models of other people's dissertations, so that you're not building from scratch, which is something that I also learned in teaching from a number of different platforms. But also another tip that I had gotten from Jim Frankel, who was such a huge proponent of sharing work, lesson plans, and Hal Ableist he was just like, he has examples, at least 3 examples for every assignment he would give, which it's like you're not reinventing the wheel, like it's already, and there's something almost it's very, it feels very human to like connect with other people even if they're not there and you're just reading their work, but it's like,
Right.
okay, this is done, and then having other people share like, this is also hard, it's hard for me, and it's not this easy process. 300-page document in, you know, in a month. So like that, yeah, rewriting and writing again, the advanced proposal, and then getting, that's where I am now, is going through the International Review Board for Teachers College. So finding, which just gives permission to collect research, and then I'll be writing the next 3 chapters of my dissertation, and then I'll defend it. I don't know if that answered your question. I don't have to go into detail.
No, it did. It's just sort of, I just wanted to like illustrate for people who are not educators, or not necessarily educators, but researchers, how that process looks, because I think it's like, you know, you hear someone's working on their doctorate and it takes years because it is a huge process, but I don't think a lot of people really understand the work that goes into it, and all of that, you know, the things that you have to do, all of the processes that you have to go through, and all of the different versions and iterations of it that you have to submit, before it's done. Like, it's a huge, huge, huge thing, literally years long process. So I just wanted you to illustrate that for people having, you know, being in the middle of it, because I think that's really, it's really interesting, and worth saying, like, this is how much work I'm actually doing, because you're working hard.
It's a lot of work. I've really enjoyed the aspects of people who have been so vulnerable. And one of the things I really love about watching your stories, specifically, is how real you are and how powerful and empowering that is to watch. Because there's like, and I've done it for classes that I'm teaching, or I'm a course assistant for, and I have to make like a video bio that should be like a minute or two, and it'll take like an hour to do, and I'm writing a transcript, and even though I'm reading it and I'm messing up a line, so I'm going back, and it's like this polishedness that we present, that it, and we don't see the struggle behind it, which is, it's so it's such a beautiful metaphor for life as well. And the dissertation process, like, there's just, it's so relatable that and it's nice to know that you're not alone, and when people are offering to be it's interesting even saying the word vulnerable, because I think there's just so much power in being just honest about, like, this is hard, I am struggling, because it's so ingrained in our culture to say, how are you? Good, I'm doing well.
Right.
It's not like, oh well, you know, I'm struggling, I stayed up last night writing 50 pages and I have a presentation, and you know, my dog is sick, and you know, there's all these like different things that could happen, and just being real in that process. So having other people to connect with, like in the dissertation process and in life, that's been really powerful for me. So thank you for you for having that strength, and that's really inspiring just to watch your videos, which I absolutely love. And I'm very honored to be talking to you. I love
You are
your
so kind. Thank you. I appreciate that a lot. A lot. And it's funny too. I think it's funny how the different pieces of life sort of intersect at the same time when you're really like learning about something. I'm reading Daring Greatly by Brene Brown right now. Have you read that?
I've read parts of it. I have not read.
It's really great. I mean, I personally love it. I don't know if it's for everybody, but I think one of the things that I mean, she is a researcher, which is also really awesome to watch, to like read this book, because I think as someone who is super, super logical, but also understands and wants to understand like the woo woo, like manifestation, like be vulnerable side of things. It's like a perfect mix of like personal experiences and life events and like research, which is so interesting. But she researches like shame and vulnerability, and she talks about vulnerability as being something people perceive as a weakness growing up. especially in the United States. I mean, I'm sure, honestly, probably everywhere, but that it's actually it's a huge strength to be vulnerable. It's actually very difficult to do that. And it takes a lot, just a lot of strength to be able to be open with other people and share those parts of your life that are really difficult. So I love that you shared that in the way that you did too. It's just like perfectly intersecting this book that I'm reading right now, that I would highly recommend. I'm only halfway through it, but it's pretty awesome so far. So before we close out, I would love for you to share a little bit about your recording projects, what's going on with them, where people can find and follow you so that once those are released, they can hear about it first.
Thank you. So you can follow me on my Instagram, which is lcastelmusic. And it's been a journey of just even like finding a stage name, and that's fun. So my recording, I when I was younger, I would write lyrics instead of like writing a diary, and it was just a way that I could process. So I would write songs, and I was maybe like 11, and my dad gave me this book of songs that he had copyrighted. There's probably like 80 of them in there, and he wrote on the cover like to Lindsey. And I remember like crossing my name out. I was like, Dad, I couldn't possibly accept this because it felt like I was be reading his journal.
Yeah.
And then I actually have it. It's right here behind me. And he wrote my name back on it, and he said, no, this is important to me. I want you to have it. And he died August 30th of 2013, and I could not bring myself to read it. And actually, in my apartment as we speak, I have a huge box of he was such a prolific songwriter. And of just so many of his songs that he wrote. And I finally this past year started to read them. And I phenomenal musician that I'm dating, Chris Barrett, and he was reading through some of the songs, and he's a singer songwriter, guitar player. He was classically trained on guitar, and he started singing, and I was like, oh, could you make an album actually for my sisters? I have an older sister and a younger sister, and I asked for Christmas if he could record one of my dad's songs for them, and he did. And then I was like, we should like do a whole album. And in the pandemic, we brought all of our instruments, and we went to Northeast Pennsylvania and rented a place. And I brought this book of my dad's songs, and he encouraged me. He's like, why don't you try singing some of the lyrics? And I was like, what? No. No. And especially as a classically trained violinist, it's ingrained in me to not perform in public or perform anything in front of, unless it's like polished.
Yes.
In master classes, you're playing things that are like halfway there, but I was just like, oh, I'm not a singer. I couldn't possibly. And he ended up being vulnerable for me, and he had lost both his parents, and he wrote a first verse of a song about that experience. And I asked him I said, it's so beautiful. And I cried listening to it. And he's like, I have only played that I think maybe, I can't remember, but I think he played it at his grandpa's funeral and maybe one other time, but he didn't like to play it because it was very emotional. And I said, please record it. It's so meaningful. I think it would be meaningful to other people too, to have that sense of connection to parents. And he said, I'll record it if you write the second verse. And I had never really shared my music, my writing that I've done since I was a little kid with anyone. And so I was like, okay, challenge accepted. Here we go. And during the pandemic, I started writing, and I wrote a second lyric for this song. And actually, I ended up I had all my parents' voicemails saved, and we ended up finding on the track that he sang the first verse that he wrote, and I sang the second verse that I wrote, and I put some of the voicemails on that we'll release this year. And I realized after that I could sing, and I could sing my dad's lyrics, which was so powerful to connect with my dad, because all the songs are a lot like journals entries in a way, and it's just to relate to him on this level of seeing pain and joy. It's a really powerful connection that keeps me feeling very close to my dad, and in a different way, kind of as an adult now, and like reading songs that he wrote when he was my age. So that's how that I started doing that, and Chris produced the music on that, and he's a phenomenal producer, and so that we're coming out with. And that's the very first album that I've ever sung on, and I absolutely adored it. It was wonderful. So then I started. I did another recording project with a family friend, and I met a group of just incredible musicians who I absolutely adore. I think there were nine guys, and we recorded in my family friend. Actually, his name is Nick County. His father died this past year, and he had grown up with me, and so he wanted me on the project. I met some of his friends and colleagues, and I had just a transformative experience, and having this supportive environment of playing, and I sang a little bit on that, which was awesome. And then I started working with Drew on a record that I'm just infinitely excited about. Drew's such a phenomenal musician and person, so it's been such a huge joy. In this experience, and I've appreciated that, because I'm not a trained singer, and I've been trained playing the violin since I was 6, so there's a part of me that almost has this imposter syndrome about like singing, that because I know there are many people out there who can sing much better than I ever could, but that doesn't take away the passion and the love that I have for it. Right. So those are the recording projects that I'm currently working on. And actually I just started with a friend, Brian Tate has been helping me. He's a really great songwriter in his own right, and guitar player and bass, and he plays a bunch of different instruments, and he's been doing a bit of songwriting with me as well. So there's a lot of different projects that I'm working on that are really significantly meaningful to me, and I'm working with people who I'm profoundly inspired of and absolutely adore as musicians, artists, and human beings. So it's a lot of special projects in the works.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all of that, and for sharing about your father's music as well. I think that's so powerful. It's like hitting my heartstrings. That's really, really phenomenal, and a very special way to connect with him now after his passing. It's incredible to be able to do that. And it's kind of interesting, like, that you hadn't really read it until recently, read his lyrics. And it probably honestly just wasn't the right time until now. And now you're able to actually like take what he's written and do something with it, which is so, so special. I cannot believe we've been talking for almost an hour. This is crazy. The time just flew by. I've been trying to keep these to like 30, 40 minutes, and I'm like, I can't stop talking to you. It's so incredible, all the things that you're doing. And I'm so grateful that you were so vulnerable with me as well in sharing all of these pieces of how you've been navigating the world and your life and things that have happened to you. So thank you so much. Thank you for being with me today. I'm so thankful that you were my guest. I made an announcement at the beginning. I just want to make it again that I am now publishing all of these videos, or if that's what you call it, on my YouTube page. So, and I will try to put that up soon. I'll put it in like the comments or something so that people can follow there as well if they want to. But thank you again for joining me today, Lindsey.
An absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. I'm honored and very grateful.
Of course, it is my pleasure. Well, have a wonderful rest of your Friday, everyone. Have an awesome weekend, and I will see you all on next week's Freelancer Live. Bye.
Thank you.